Hello, and welcome to Educated Women Uplifted. I am your host, Beverly Hall Mon, and I'm joined today by my co host, Belinda Clift. Belinda and I are joined by our guest, Louise Evans. Louise, I had the pleasure of meeting you last summer at the DKG European Forum Conference in Brighton, so it's lovely to have you here with us now. Louise is an international speaker, educator, and creator of the Five Chairs model, a practical framework that helps people understand and transform their behavior in challenging situations. Louise began her career with a background in theater before discovering her passion for teaching. She went on to combine interest in languages, psychology, and communication to build a career in education and corporate training, specializing in cross cultural communication, leadership, and personal development.
Louise developed the Five Chairs methodology to help individuals recognize their habitual reactions and consciously choose more constructive responses. Louise is the author of a widely recognized book on behavioral intelligence and a popular TEDx speaker. Her TEDx talk on the Five Chairs has reached over 6.5 million people worldwide. Her work is now being implemented not only in the corporate environment, but also in schools, where her approach helps children develop self-awareness and emotional regulation at an early age. Louise, welcome to Educated Women Uplifted.
Wow, blimey, I feel uplifted after all of that. Thank you. Lovely introduction.
We're so glad to have you here. So glad to have you here. Now, Louise, you were born in Cambridge, England, but you're
Yes,
now based in Italy.
I
So,
am.
can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and what brought you to Italy?
Yeah. Have you ever been to Cambridge in England by any chance? Have your travels taken you there? It's no, it's I recommend it. It's a beautiful university town. I mean, you probably know there is great rivalry between Oxford and Cambridge. So if you're born in Cambridge, you never talk about Oxford, you know. So I was brought up in a university town, so I had education around me all the time, and it was a beautiful upbringing. It's a perfect place to bring young children up. And I think after a while, I felt I needed to fly the nest. And in fact, my first job took me abroad. I was actually, I fell into teaching, to be quite honest, because I was more interested in performing arts. And one summer, I needed to do a job. You know, it was a summer job to earn some money. So I started teaching English as a foreign language, but through theater. And I got the bug. I thought, oh my God, this is, I love this. And it actually then became my profession. So I am so happy that I did that when I was young. And then that just led on to, I studied languages and theater at university. And then I did my certificate for education at Cambridge University. And that led me into education. I started off in school education. And I still remember at college, they sort of prepared us for, it was secondary school. But I was sent to one of these really tough schools in the outside Cambridge, in the countryside. And we weren't prepared for that because they did it on purpose. So I was going in and sort of, hello, and trying to be friendly with the children. You know, they make you make the mistake in order to realize that there are certain things that you don't need to do. They ate me alive, these young kids. And I came away there thinking, the last thing I ever want to do is teach in a public school. But then they said, okay, right, you have the experience. Now let's talk about discipline. Now let's talk about how do you approach children to get their respect before you drop your mask. But my God, I mean, that was really tough. And then after, I just fell in love with it, and that developed from teaching in schools to moving into the private sector. and then into the corporate world. And my first job actually was in Germany, where I was teaching in Munich. And there I was teaching in companies communication. And then that moved on slowly. That evolved into teaching cross-cultural diversity management and then into global leadership. And then slowly I developed my own model. But I spend most of my time in the private sector, actually. So it's been wonderful in the last few years to come back into primary and secondary education with 5 chairs.
You've lived across several countries, England, France, Germany, and Italy. How did those cultural experiences influence your work?
Yes, I think, how living in another culture helps you understand who you are because we can live in our own bubbles, and when you live in another culture, you are forced to look at who you are and what you represent. And I remember going to France and being very judgmental about the French because they didn't do it the British way, you know. And then it's about, oh, hang on a minute, there are different ways of living in the world. So it's extremely important for you to open your mind, to help you open your mind and see different perspectives. So I actually went through 3 culture shocks. First in France, and things like people kissing each other on cheeks. We didn't do that in Britain. So, and then going to Germany where people are very direct in their communication style. I mean, they're direct for good reasons because they want to reduce the level of ambiguity around them. But, me being British, we're a bit like the Chinese in Europe. We can be very indirect and a lot of people think that we're ambiguous, but we're really sort of trying to protect relationships. And so we get misinterpreted. And I think that's what I learned when I traveled and lived abroad is to open my mind and realize that my way is only one way. And there are plenty of other ways of being in the world. And it's about exploring them and understanding them and being curious about them. So it really helped me grow up, I think.
So, do you kiss people on the cheek now?
Beverly, the tough thing is that in Europe, depending on the country you're in, you have to be very careful because in Italy, you kiss twice. If you go to Switzerland, you kiss 3 times, but then you have to be careful which side you start with. And so it all gets really very complicated. And yes, I do, is basically the answer to that. You see, I've become very physical and more sort of outwardly affectionate since I've been living in the Italian culture.
So, you created something called the 5 chairs, Louise. What is that? And can you explain the color of each personality of the chairs?
Yeah, I tell you what, I've got them here. I've got a mini version of them. Beverly, you actually experienced them, didn't you? Here they are here. That's right. That's a mini version of them. So the idea is that in any moment in life, particularly when somebody triggers us, then we have a choice of how to respond to people. And so each chair represents different ways of responding to something which might be annoying us. So if somebody says, oh, that'll never work, then if I answer from the red chair, then I'm going to attack them back. It's called attack. So each chair has a name, it has an animal metaphor, and a set of behaviors which go with it. So when you're in the red chair, you become a jackal and you attack back. And this is the chair of where all our negative behaviors are, where we moan and groan and complain and blame, etc., etc. And we do it very spontaneously. We judge people very, very quickly in situations. So that's the first one. The second one is the hedgehog. So, if you say something that idea will never work, then what happens to me is I go into self-doubt. And that's the name of the chair. And so I'm thinking, oh yeah, they're right. That is a stupid idea and it won't work. So why did I open my mouth? So we go into imposter syndrome, into victim behavior, and we sort of collapse on ourselves. So in the red chair, we're attacking out. And in the yellow chair, we're attacking ourselves. Then we move on to another choice, which is the green one, and that is the meerkat chairs, where if somebody says that to us, before we respond, we take a moment to manage our emotions. Because, if somebody says that, one reaction could be is that you do become emotional. So it's the chair where we calm down, take a deep breath, and come into our rational thinking and into our curiosity. Because if you're curious, then that usually blocks judgment. So here it's the weight chair, and we're going into self-control, which then allows us to move on to these two top chairs, which is where we're trying to spend most of our life. The blue one is the detect chair, and it is the dolphin. And here it's about speaking up. It's about believing in yourself, being confident. It's about being assertive but not aggressive. So if somebody says, "Well, that idea will never work," then I'm gonna ask them and say, "Could you tell me why?" Let me continue speaking, and I'll explain even further what's behind my thinking. So I stand up for myself. And I'm open to dialogue, but I'm not going to let somebody sort of mow over me. So we come into our full power there, but it's not complete unless we add the last one, which is the purple one, which is the connect chair, and where we go into empathy. So if somebody is attacking me in some way or is upset with me, then I'm going to try and understand what's going on for them, what's important for them, what their needs are. So the idea is we're trying to stay in this area in our lives so that we have decent, controlled conversations rather than going down here where we often block communication with another person. So life is about, we always have a choice, basically, and the choice that we take is going to have an impact, and there's going to be consequences. So that's basically.
So I'm curious, why did you use chairs for a model instead of a traditional model?
Yes. I think it's because, if you're going to learn something, it's quite useful that it's very visual, but also tactile. I was trying to develop something which is multisensorial so that people would remember it easily, because what we're trying to do is regulate our behavior in the moment. As the temperature of a conversation might be heating up, we need something to trigger us, to remind us who we are and what we're doing. Now, the idea of the chairs is also, it comes a little bit from my experience of transactional analysis, where that's an approach where three chairs are used and you move from being the adult to being the child to being the parent. And I like the idea of that. So I used it here because then I can invite people to sit in the chair and become the actual mindset of the chair. And so you can see, especially with children love playing, acting from the chairs. They'll rush up when we're practicing, and they'll fight over which chair they want to sit in. But slowly they're able to sit in a chair and understand their own behaviors and the impact that they're having in the world. So the more visceral it is, I think the more we tend to remember. Sitting in the chair, you actually embody it.
It's interesting. And I'm curious, what happens in people's behavior that makes this model necessary? And do you find that it works better for younger or as adults?
A good one. I think you know what it is, Beverly. There are many moments in a day when we're stressed. There's just too much going on the way we set up our lives. We're under a lot of pressure. We're doing a lot of things. We've got so much stimulus coming at us because now, of course, we have phones, we have constantly reacting to everything. And all it takes sometimes is just a trigger to push our emotions into a state where we begin misbehaving with one another. So, I think when we do misbehave, then we have a serious impact on our relationships around us, whether they're with our children, whether with our partners, families, anybody, basically. And I think the thing is, first we do ourselves harm, when we're misbehaving. And I don't think we want to. It's just that sometimes we get overwhelmed. I mean, being a teacher at school right now is pretty exhausting, because not only do you have to manage yourself and the children, you also have to manage parents who are complaining, etc. So trying to manage all the duties that you have, and the children and yourself and the parents, etc., can be very, very demanding. And it's all about human behavior. So I think children get this immediately because, they see the chairs, they relate to the animals, they love the animals, and they very quickly, I mean, we work with children from the age of 3 upwards. And what they have actually shown is in neuroscience that if you teach empathy to children in a regular way between the age of 3 and 6, they never forget it. So, the idea is that if you can help children get self-agency, because they respond very well to things like, oh, I'm being a jackal, and well, you look as though you're being a hedgehog. You're not very happy, but I'm a giraffe, so I can come and help you. And they take on the play acting, but then they actually manage to read themselves and change their behaviors in the moment. So, but they're like sponges. Children like sponges. It's much more difficult for us adults. And when we work in schools, first we work with teachers to help teachers become very aware of the impact that they're having on the children. And then we certify teachers to teach the children, but then we involve the parents because, parents, again, are under a lot of pressure. And sometimes, what's happening at home can actually destroy what's happening at school. So it's about, well, let's all be aware that we can do things which are not very productive in our lives. And if we're with children, they're watching us and they're copying us. So it's about what do we want to have copied in our behavior and what not? Because, parents, I mean, no pressure, but the role of parents is incredibly important, just like teachers. So, yeah, it takes longer with adults because we're so conditioned, we're so set in our ways sometimes, but it just takes longer, I think, to change.
I think I need to use this with my 3-year-old granddaughter. Of course, when she's the jackal, I call her a grumpy monkey.
Oh, a grumpy monkey. And now that would be so interesting, Belinda, because if you did it, then you could have that sort of conversation like, do you ever feel like the jackal? And then it's like, well, there are different ways that you can be. What has happened is I'm working with a lovely principal of a school in Canada, Michael Bouchard, and uh, there we work with bullies. And you know what the bullies say when they've met the 5 chairs? They say, do you want to have a choice? They don't realize that they don't have to be a jackal, that there are other choices. And I found
Wow.
too, below my TED talk, a lot of the comments are, even from adults, is, I didn't know I had a choice. It's almost as though people are living from a default mode, and that is the way they are, and it's set in stone. So, with your granddaughter, you could have a lot of fun with her, playing with the animals, how, say, well, a dolphin does this and a giraffe does that. And you could actually probably interest in her in behaving in a different way.
So, can you give us a simple, everyday example of where the 5 chairs would apply?
I mean, anywhere where, I mean, the best examples, the best use of the 5 chairs is when you are being triggered, basically. So anything could be, I mean, but Belinda, for example, can you think of something that has happened to you recently, if somebody has said something or done something which has wound you up? When you said about your little granddaughter, what does she do?
Casey,
Yes, Casey. What does
she
she?
will not tell you what she wants. She just cries and will not tell you what's wrong.
Oh my God. So, okay. So if you're in the red chair there, then it's about, oh, for God's sake, will you just stop crying? Is there nothing else you can do except just cry? It's so annoying. So that's your a jackal approach. If you're in hedgehog, you'll be thinking it's my fault. It's all about me. She doesn't like me. There's something wrong with me. That's why she cries with me. If you're in the green chair, it's about, okay, hang on a minute. What is going on here? Let me just think. What has happened before? What is the situation? Is this something that she does on a regular basis? Here you're trying to collect the facts. Okay. Now, if you go into the purple chair, which is the giraffe chair, it's about what does she need? That is is the most important question. What does she need? What is important for her right now? Does she need a hug? Does she need something to eat? Does she need, and even then, the question from this chair would be, darling, what is it that you need? What do you want right now? What can I give you right now? And here it's about going into action, is actually doing something, maybe distracting her attention, being sort of very proactive and thinking of a way of directing her behavior, which is away from crying. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think I go through all 5 of those phases with her. That's perfect.
I think that's the thing about the chairs, is that, and I love the fact that you said that, because the more you're aware, the less you stay here. You can have, oh God, here we go again, excuse me, right. And then you move on. You move on into the meerkat and say, oh, now calm down and let's see how we can change the situation. Because obviously the longer you stay in the red chair, you're not actually solving the problem at all. So I love the fact that you say that, because, the idea is that we ultimately end up in the chairs that are actually going to productively help the situation.
Well, Louise, you mentioned that it's almost like people are surprised that they have a choice and that they have a default reaction. What do you say, or what do you think is the most common default reaction that people fall into?
Judgment. I think we're not very good at diversity, in the sense that we're not very good at even thought diversity. If somebody has a different idea to mine, then this can create discomfort. I don't think we're trained enough to be able to hear other people's views and opinions and accept them with curiosity. And unfortunately, we have something in our mind, in neuroscience, the amygdala, which will misread diversity as being a threat. So you don't think the way I think, therefore you're a threat. Therefore, I need to defend myself. So I'll probably counterattack you. Or I will the 3 reactions from the amygdala, and if you think about it, whenever we get into arguments, the 3 typical behaviors are fight, flight, freeze. So, in an argument, you can sort of say, oh, come on, and you get into the argument, and that's the fight. Or you can leave and say, I'm not talking to you, and that's flight. Or you can sort of close down, which is freezing. And these are all actually usually quite inappropriate for the situations that we're in, but we are allowing ourselves to be hijacked by our amygdala. And what we need to do is intervene and say, okay, that's interesting. That's very different to the way I think. Let me just explore that. And becoming comfortable with diversity, I think, is one of the most important things we should ever learn to do in life, and whatever type of diversity, basically. So diversity then brings up judgment, and we do a lot of judgment. Another one thing that is very typical with women is self-doubt. But that comes from the generations and generations of history, which we're moving through now, and we're becoming more and more comfortable in the dolphin chair, which is speaking up and being assertive. But that's taken a long time. So, there are patterns. It really depends on who you are and your character, how you've been brought up. But I think the thing is, Belinda, it's recognizing how you are reacting in life. It's a lot of it is about self-awareness, and then taking care of yourself, knowing what your triggers are, and then making choices.
So what led you to personally develop this model?
My mother. No, seriously, I had quite a complicated relationship with my mother. We're a Welsh family. A small Welsh woman, she was like a volcano. She had I have 2 brothers. She created 3 large or tall children, actually. She came up to here on me, but my God, she had a character. So I had a love-hate relationship with her. For a long time, I thought, well, it's all her fault. And I used to blame her for my behavior. Can happen, until I realized that actually there was things that I was doing that maybe triggered her. And she was an extremely important person in my life. very supportive and generous. I mean, sort of bipolar, very generous, very empathetic, but then could turn into being very judgmental and difficult. So I think it was because had adopted some of those behaviors and I didn't want to be like that myself. I started to do a lot of spiritual work on myself in order to improve the behaviors which were holding me back. So that has always been a huge part of my life, which has been in parallel with my professional path. And I just thank her cotton socks every single day, because if I hadn't had that relationship with her, I would never have invented the 5 chairs. And now um, it helped me change myself, basically, and take responsibility for my behaviors. And when she died at 98, our relationship had improved immensely. So it was beautiful work to do. And as I say, I always think of her when I'm doing the chairs and say, thanks, Ma, because you gave me purpose in my life.
That's beautiful. That's wonderful. And that's how fabulous and how blessed you were to have your mother
Yes.
for that a long amount of time, for her to be 98 years old before you lost her. So, Louise, what is at stake if someone never learns to manage their behavior? What do you think? How would you be different had you not used that relationship with your mother to develop this model?
Wow. You know, self-awareness is huge. And it's not obvious that people are going to get a chance to develop self-awareness in their lives. You know, a lot of people will spend their life blaming other people or blaming situations for what is happening in their life. And what does it take? I think sometimes it takes pain, is feeling uncomfortable in one's own life, feeling upset, feeling sad, and then finding supporting people or supporting situations that actually help you see that you can help yourself. If you get stuck in the sense that, you know, it's not about you, but it's about the world, and go into victim mode, then you're in trouble. So a part of it is wanting to go down the road of self-awareness and self-development and self-mastery, because you're motivated to want to improve your own behavior. If you don't, then the only way is if you get feedback from other people. Now you've got to be prepared to listen to other people's feedback. And that's not always easy, you know, especially if it's negative, because even though feedback is an extremely important way to learn and grow, there's a huge tension that we hold with feedback, because part of us wants to learn, but part of us also wants to be liked by people. And often when we receive feedback, we feel that we're not liked, and then that becomes a threat, you know. So it's a fantastic question, because I think in order to change, you just have to be open to exploring yourself and accepting that we're not perfect, but we can, you know, and that we do get things wrong, but it's all part of learning, and that we can improve. It's a journey, you know.
So, what changes when someone does learn these skills?
Hey, life becomes so much easier. I mean, I think you should ask my husband that question, because he was very tolerant and patient with me when I was trying to, because I was very judgmental. I was copying my mother. I used to pick fights all over the place. I used to argue with him all the time. And it was like, oh God. But, you know, and he stuck with me because he said he saw potential, because I was learning, I was working on myself. And I was lucky enough he's Palestinian. And he's a very strong man internally because of all the things that he's been through. And he's a real mixture of being a dolphin, assertive, but also very empathetic. So I was lucky enough to have a good role model around me, and somebody who was patient as I was going through my learning process. So my um, relationships just change. You know, first the relationship with yourself. You treat yourself with much more care and love. You forgive yourself more. You understand yourself more. And when you do that to yourself, you're going to do it with people around you as well. So, you know, I remember the day when he said to me, but we don't argue anymore. And I said, yeah, that's great. And he said, well, maybe, I think maybe I miss it from time to time. And I thought, no, you don't. No, you don't. I don't want to go back there anymore, because, you know, I went through a lot of pain. when I was arguing, and I saw my parents argue all their lifetime. They both died when they were 98, but they had a dynamic which they managed, or rather, my mother argued with my father. Let's put it like that. And my father was a saint. But I thought, no, I don't want to live like that, because there was so much inner turmoil in my life that when I started working with myself, I went and did a course on nonviolent communication, which was absolutely wonderful. I also worked with Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk who brought mindfulness into Europe, and also Eckhart Tolle of the Power of Now, who helps us understand how the mind can sabotage us, and how we need to actually intervene and speak to our minds. And because we talk about we are what we eat, but really we are what we think. And the brain is listening to what we say all the time. So we need to choose really what thoughts we want to feed our mind with, so that the end result is positive behavior rather than the opposite.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So you say that self-awareness, that working on yourself, and you are quoted as saying, the best thing I ever did in life was to work on myself. So why is that the best thing that you have ever done, other than to prevent your husband from calling you a jackal? What is the
Yeah, it's because the the quality of my life changed. In my own case, part of the relationship with my mother was when I was misbehaving, she would sort of abandon me and just walk off. And that felt quite devastating. So I took that forward into reactions of jealousy and possessiveness. And if you're jealous and possessive, it's a nightmare life, because you can't live your own life. You're living half in the pockets of another person that you're jealous of. So you're checking on them, and uh, afraid that they're going to leave you. And so life becomes uh, complicated. As soon as I managed to sort through all of that, I was able to free myself into the life I was meant to live. But I'm a very late developer, because I think it took me up until I was about 45, 50 to really free myself of some of the negative impacts that type of thinking of possessiveness and jealousy and being over judgmental, where it can take you. But wow, I love my life now. I think I can say that, and I forgive myself really quickly if I make mistakes. But before, I would just whip myself and so I do it to other people as well. So I love my life now, and I'm looking forward to all the years that are coming ahead of me, because it just gets better all the time. I'm teaching the 5 chairs, so I'm sort of saying to myself continuously. So it's just like training myself all the time.
So, how can someone catch themselves in the moment before reacting badly?
Yeah, great question. That's why the colors are there. It's like, when we do the training, then we learn what the different chairs mean, and we can identify ourselves with the chairs. So, and we look closely, like if you're in jackal, then you have nonverbal behavior, you have types of behavior, you have types of language, and you have types of bodily reaction. So when you are aware of that cognitively, you can then start observing yourself in the moment. And when you see, the temperature of my body is increasing, my voice has changed, I'm using language which is a bit judgmental. In that moment, you think, I'm being a jackal. Then, when you catch it, you can't change anything you're not aware of. But when you become aware and conscious of your behavior, that is the moment where you can step in and change. So it's about practice, really. It's about training, and you can train yourself. You can train yourself to be more empathetic, and you can train yourself to be less judgmental. And that's really what the program is all about. It's about, like, saying, instead of saying, "What's up?" That's interesting. That's very different to the way I think. Let's have a look at that. And just being in Meerkat, it's a beautiful chair. just thinking, wow, that is very different to the way I think. Let's explore that. You can train yourself to say that rather than they have no idea what they're talking about. I'm right, you're wrong type thing. So it's a question of practice.
And that brings us full circle back to what you were talking about, self-awareness and that ability to learn yourself and know yourself and forgive yourself.
Yes.
Yeah,
Understand yourself.
interesting.
That's why it's very important. That's why we want to bring it to children at a very early age so that they get self-agency. They can understand why they are reacting in different ways because they're exploring the chairs, and that's why the animals are fun to use because they look at the animal behavior and they can compare it to their own behavior. And so then once they're conscious and they say, oh, I'm being a jackal, then they can change. And so the idea is that with the help of the chairs and all the other things that we do in schools related to the chairs, then they quickly come into consciousness and can then move.
So if you can name something just very simple, one simple thing that an individual could change or I could change, just something I wanted to start improving today, what is it that you suggest? What could I do differently?
Yeah, I think, I keep going back to this, but I think it is so important. I think one simple thing you can do is watch your judgments. As you are listening to a person, and are you negatively judging them? If you can catch that and invite yourself to say, oh, no, wait a minute, let me just explore that more. My challenge to you would be to spend 1 hour in the presence of another human being without ever judging them.
That is not simple, Louise. I'm sorry.
I know, exactly. And then what does that feel like? Because as we judge another person in our minds, it actually also comes through our behavior. So I think the first thing it's like going on a mental diet, is whenever I see myself wanting to judge, it's saying, wait a minute, no, let me just have a look at that from curiosity. So the mantra is, oh, that's interesting. That's different and that's interesting. Rather, that's different and that's wrong. Because the jackal is all about I'm right and you're wrong. Whereas the meerkat's about, wow, that's different. You're different to me. And okay, let's see where that's going. So I think the whole of the human race needs to do that. If you look at where we are right now, we're living in a jackal world right now. I mean, heavy. So
I
the
think you're
idea
right. I think it's so. It must be so. It's the attitude that we have, unfortunately. Yeah.
is, it is. We do have that. It's the attitude of I'm right and you're wrong. And if we can just move beyond that and say rather that I have my way and you have your way, let's talk about the two ways and see, how we can explore each other rather than how we can try and dominate each other. The world will be a different place.
Louise, you have 6.8 million views of your TED Talk. Your book, Five Chairs, Five Choices, is also a success. So what's next for you?
I've written a book for children, which is called The Magnificent Five. That's also on Amazon. And it's for children between the age of 4 and about 8 and 9, or even higher, actually. And that's been a wonderful journey because I wrote it in order to put it with the curriculum, because we're writing a curriculum. We have a lovely project in Ireland in 4 schools there, but also in Canada. And the good news is that we've also been accepted for an Erasmus project in Tallinn University in Estonia, here in Europe, where they will be testing out the scientific validity of the 5-chair methodology, which will really help us to get it into schools, deeper into schools as a methodology, because we want to work with principals, to work with teachers, children, and with parents as well, to sort of get the whole community thinking about their behaviors and just to uplift behaviors. So that's happening. I've also written a book for a film, which is called Animystics, The Revelation of the Five Thrones. And it's actually very exciting because there are a couple of, there's a group in Korea that is interested in looking at adapting it to the screen. There's one in America. At the moment, we are, because the big dream is to make a film, which is a film about four young characters who discover these five thrones, which actually are keeping balance in the world. If we can make a film, it would give publicity to the methodology, and then we can develop all the education behind, because we have 5 chairs for the corporate world, 5 chairs for couples, 5 chairs for schools, because anywhere there are human beings together, 5 chairs is sort of valid. So quite a lot of projects right now. It's an exciting time for us. And also, I became a member of Delta Kappa Gamma.
Yes, you did.
I am so happy. It's such a wonderful organization. My God, I'm going to Holland soon, very soon, and presenting with Marie Antoinette. I'm presenting the 5 chairs there, and it's been wonderful meeting everybody in the organization. Just come back from Iceland. That was fantastic as well. So it's a gift, actually, having met you all and to be part of the organization. I feel so blessed.
Well, we're blessed to have you
Oh,
as part of our society. We are blessed to have you.
thank you
So,
very much.
you've talked about self awareness versus self doubt and the not to judge and the role that being judgmental has. If listeners remember just one thing from this conversation that we had today, what should it be?
You always have a choice. So in any moment, whatever happens to you, you can always choose how to respond. So, and here are the choices with all the consequences. So the idea is, let's stay away. I mean, let's really work on keeping, frequenting them as little as possible and concentrating on the top 3 chairs here. So that, I think, is our ultimate responsibility, is that everything that we do and say is our responsibility and our choice. And let's not ever say to somebody else, you make me angry. Let's say, I get angry when you do that, but I'm going to take responsibility for everything that I do, because that's my stuff and that's my choice. So that's probably, I think, the most important thing to take away, which gives us power.
This is truly a powerful and helpful message.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the work that you have done in self-regulation. Our community is going to get a lot out of this.
Oh,
Great, Belinda. And I love, Louise, that you said choice is power. Choice is power. That's a good mantra to remember. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and your work with us, Louise. And we thank those ladies and our members at home for listening to us today. And if you enjoyed hearing Louise's story and work, please share this episode with your friends. Thank you so much for joining us, Louise and Belinda. We just hope to see you again on another Educated Women Uplifted. Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you for having me. Bye.